Economic and Financial Crimes Commission invites 3 ministers of Buhari administration. Pharmacist urges federal government to prioritize drug security. National Council for Women's Societies tasks Apabio on inclusion of women in governance. On business news, federal government issues 2 oil export terminal licenses to generate more income for the country. On international scene, fighting resumes in Khartoum after 24-hour ceasefire. On sport update, Eagles camp bubbles as Osimhen Oshie Samuel returns. Hello and welcome to Standard Voice Television Newsroom. I'm Mkuta Muhammad. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission has summoned 3 ministers in the outgone Muhammad Buhari administration for questioning. Reports on Monday, June 12, 2023, identified the former ministers as those of Justice Abubakar Malami, SAN, Aviation Hadi Sirika, and Humanitarian Affairs, Disaster Management, and Social Development, Sadiya Umar Farouk. The 3 ministers are expected to report at the EFCC head office in Abuja anytime from Tuesday, June 13th, to answer questions in connection with allegations containing petitions against them. Several calls have been made to the Anti-Graft Agency to investigate the Senator of Sirika following the revelation around Nigeria Air Project. In a related development, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, in its bid to check the increasing incidence of fraudulent withdrawals and use of pre-registered SIM cards to open wallet accounts, has met with representatives of telecommunications and financial technology companies. Its spokesperson, Wilson Owojere, said in a statement in Abuja that the meeting was held in Kano on Tuesday. Mr. Owojere said the Commission urged the operators to put in place measures to detect and report suspicious transactions to law enforcement agencies. He reported the zonal commander, Farouk Dogundaji, as stressing that the impetus for the engagement was the Commission's concern about increase in a pattern of fraudulent activities. Mr. Dogundaji said that the pattern clearly showed that fraudsters were gravitating towards fintechs because of some observed vulnerabilities. Our correspondent, Ibrahim Dosara, takes a look at the corruptions in Nigeria, and here is his report.
Following the arrest of the Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele last week by the Department of State Services, DSS, a lot of controversies, a lot of calls and public concern have been raised in Nigeria by many philanthropist organizations and other individuals who are very much concerned about the corruption that had taken place during the last regime of President Muhammad Buhari. And people have been calling for the arrest and the immediate investigation into the affairs of public office holders, especially the ministers. And one of the ministers that is being accused of enriching himself is the Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami, who has been accused of so many misdeeds in his office during the past immediate administration of President Muhammad Buhari. Also, along with him is the Minister of Aviation, Hadi Sirika, who is also accused of doing wrong things and financial fraud in his office during the past immediate administration of President Muhammad Buhari. There is the Minister of Humanitarian Services, Sadiya Farouk, who is also accused of so many misdeeds financially in her office, and many others being accused of wrong things during their tenure of office. And that is why the Nigerian public and many other individuals are calling for their investigation into the affairs of their offices during the last administration. Ibrahim Dosara for SVTV News.
Pharmacists under the aegis of the Society for Pharmaceutical Sales and Marketing of Nigeria have urged the federal government to implement policies that would promote and ensure drug availability and security in the country. The call by the pharmacists came ahead of the Society's forthcoming induction ceremony and fellowship investiture scheduled for Thursday in Lagos, which the pharmacists describe as a significant milestone for them. President of the Society, Tunde Oyenera, in a statement said the government should prioritize drug security by adopting policies that would provide an enabling business environment for indigenous manufacturing of raw materials for the local production of medicines. He noted that the country's pharma industry is faced with enormous challenges ranging from inadequate infrastructure, low capacity, less funding and patronage from the government and donor agencies, as well as a high cost of production and an unfriendly environment. The National Council for Women's Societies on Wednesday tasked the 10th Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, on inclusion of women in governance. The National President of NCWS, Hajia Lemi Lau, gave the task while congratulating Akpabio after his emergence as the 10th President of the Senate in Abuja on Tuesday. Hajia Lau said that his emergence was in the interest of Nigeria and Nigerian women in particular. She described Akpabio as a strong supporter of women, and that she has no doubt that he would continue to support women as the 10th Senate President. Hajia Lau said that they are aware of his belief that women are better managers, so they urge him to canvass for all-inclusive government with adequate women representation. The leadership of the National Association of Nigerian Students on Tuesday visited President Bola Tinubu over the student loan bill that he signed into law on Monday. The NANS delegation was led by the body's national president, Umar Barambu. Speaking to the State House correspondents after engagement with the president, Mr. Barambu revealed that they urged him to review the constitution of the special committee that will oversee the new Nigerian Education Loan Fund to include students' representatives. In response, the president promised to consider the requests of the NANS leaders, but urged the students' body to ensure unity among its members across the country to achieve more. He said they have to employ democratic means in their programs and elections, saying that anyone who is unable to accept and celebrate a free and fair election does not deserve the joy of victory. Residents and police were still searching for dozens of people who were on the overcrowded boat that capsized early Monday on the Niger River in the Patagi district of Kwara State. A police spokesman, Okasomi Ajayi, said 100 people have been rescued from the disaster that occurred at about 160 kilometers from Ilorin, the state capital. According to the reports, most of those who drowned were relatives from several villages who attended the wedding together and partied late into the night. A local chief, Abdul Ghana Lukpada, said they arrived at the ceremony on motorcycles but had to leave on the locally made boat after a downpour flooded the road. The boat was overloaded and close to 300 persons were said to be inside the boat when the incident happened. Lukpada said that the boat hit a big log inside the water and split into two. Now in business news. The federal government on Tuesday issued and signed licenses for the establishment of 2 crude oil export terminals capable of generating $11 billion revenue annually for the country. It's issued the licenses through the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority to Belema Sweet Export Terminal Limited and the NNPC Exploration and Production Limited in Abuja. Speaking at the event in Abuja, the Chief Executive, Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, Farouk Ahmad, said the signing of the terminal establishment licenses for the 2 crude oil export terminals would lead to the addition of more than 4 million barrels of oil capacity to Nigeria's export storage. He noted that subsequent to these licenses, terminal establishment notices were to be published in the Federal Government Gazette. The terminals are required to operate within the provisions of the conditions of the licenses as contained in the license document. He added that with the establishment of the Belema Sweet Crude Oil Terminal, Nigeria now ranks #1 in the world to establish a crude oil export terminal that is climate conscious, where traditional energy and renewable energy integration is operated through a virtual power plant model. Now in international news.
Audio Jungle. Audio Jungle.
First fighting resumed in the Sudanese capital Khartoum on Monday. Since mid-April, Sudan's military, headed by the Burhan, and the paramilitary rapid support forces, led by General Mohamed Hamdan Daglo, have been locked in a violent conflict. The fighting has killed more than 860 civilians, according to Sudan's Doctors Syndicate, which tracks civilians' casualties, though the actual death toll is likely much higher. Last Friday, warring sides in the African nation agreed to a 24-hour ceasefire, which started 6 a.m. Saturday and ended at 6 a.m. Sunday morning. Sudan's conflict has reduced the capital of Khartoum to an urban battlefield, with many city districts without running water or electricity. Widespread looting and sexual violence has been reported, including the rape of women and girls in Khartoum and the western Darfur region. Still on the international scene, Congolese President Denis Sassou Nguesso says he believes that Africa cannot remain silent in the face of the conflict in Ukraine. President Sassou Nguesso said this in Abidjan on Monday during the beginning of a 3-day state visit aimed at strengthening cooperation ties between his country, the Republic of Congo, and Ivory Coast. About 13 agreements will be signed in the fields of fishing, agriculture, livestock breeding, and tourism during the state visit. President Sassou said, "We are all suffering the effects of these wars directly," adding that inflation is rising everywhere and he believes that Africa cannot remain silent or indifferent in the face of such a tragedy. The remarks come just a few days before several of the continent's head of state, including Sassou Nguesso, are set to meet in Kiev and Moscow to mediate.
We are all suffering the effects of these wars directly on our peoples. Inflation is rising everywhere. And we believe that Africa cannot remain silent or indifferent in the face of such a tragedy. The remark comes just a few days before several of the continent's heads of state, including Sassou Nguesso, are set to meet in Kiev and Moscow to mediate. It also comes as concerns grow about Russia quitting the Ukraine deal, allowing the safe export of grain and fertilizers. It was agreed that a few heads of state, in fact, one head of state per Central Africa sub-region, plus the current president of the African Union, and that 5 or 6 heads of state could travel to Ukraine and Russia to bring a message of peace.
Now a sport update. Fenerbahce defender Bright Osai Samuel is the last Eagle to team up with the rest of the squad for Sunday's 2023 AFCON qualifier against Sierra Leone in Liberia as he joins the team for Wednesday's training session at the Mobolaji Johnson Arena in Lagos. Reports gathered that the defender arrived at the Super Eagles camp last night and, having missed 2 training sessions already, will join the rest of the team from Wednesday's session before the teams depart for Liberia via a chartered flight on Saturday morning. Napoli striker Victor Osimhen, who also missed the first training session on Monday, was part of Tuesday's closed session, having arrived at the camp on Monday night. Meanwhile, Super Eagles head coach Jose Pizarro has expressed confidence in the 4 home-based player he invited to the national team for the Sierra Leone encounter. A win against the Sierra Leone Stars will guarantee Nigeria's place at next year's AFCON in Ivory Coast, as the Eagles led the qualifying Group A with 9 points. And that's all we'll have a news update for today. But before we go, a recap of the major headlines. Economic and Financial Crimes Commission invites 3 ministers of Buhari administration. Pharmacist urges federal government to prioritize drug security. National Council for Women's Societies tasks Apabio on inclusion of women in governance. On business news, federal government issues 2 oil export terminal licenses to generate more income for the country. On international scene, fighting resumes in Khartoum after 24-hour ceasefire. On sport update, Eagles camp bubbles as Osimhen Osei Samuel returns. Thanks for watching. That's all on the news. I'm Mohammed. Do have a nice day.